The officer in charge of the investigation left the court a satisfied man after the judge said the killings had a hard-bitten edge that could only horrify and stagger non-criminal minds.
Like Michael Steele, Jack Womes had originally been advised against appearing in the dock. During the trial, particularly when he saw how well Steele was managing to defend himself, he changed his mind. It proved to be an emotional experience. Speaking to his defence barrister, David Letterman QC, Womes agreed that he'd been in prison at the same time as Pat Tate, and also agreed that he was an expert shot, having used his father's 12-ball shotguns from the time he was a young boy to shoot rabbits and dead branches off trees. When Letterman put it to him that the prosecution would say he cold-bloodedly killed Tate along with Tucker and Rolfe, Womes could no longer hold back his feelings. "I could not even kill a sparrow. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not capable of killing. To say I killed these men is ridiculous. I did not know Mr. Tucker, and I did not know Mr. Rolfe. The last time I saw Pat Tate was when he was being transferred from a prison near Havenhill, Suffolk, with my brother Johnny. He was a friend." Letterman then suggested the Womes was put up for the shooting by Steele. Womes raised his voice again. "I would not do it for anybody. I could not do it. Why would I want to do it? I deny it. I deny any suggestion that I had anything to do with drugs or murder. All the stuff about the Duff drugs deal is rubbish. I would much rather put money into motors. I would never deal in drugs." Womes told the jury how while working as a bouncer, he had seen a girl high on drugs take her clothes off and dance naked. "There was this girl like Leah Betts. She'd had some bad gear and was foaming at the mouth. That worried me sick, and I called an ambulance for her. I told undercover police to come in and search for drugs." Then, without warning, Womes burst into tears and began sobbing uncontrollably in the witness box. "I did not do anything like that. What they're suggesting is ridiculous. They don't know what I'm going through, being locked up. They won't even let me cuddle my own son." Under cross-examination by Andrew Munday QC, Womes admitted that he had indeed been in the Rettendon area at the time of the murders, but that it was just a pure and unfortunate coincidence. He claimed that Nichols had called him and asked him to pick up a broken-down Volkswagen Passat from outside a pub on the A130, just a few hundred yards from the murder scene. That, said Womes, explained his brief mobile phone call to Nichols. He was letting him know he'd got the car. Munday pointed out that his phone had been spotted in the area the day before the killings, and suggested that he was scouting the murder scene. Womes shook his head and told Munday that with the greatest of respect, he could not be more wrong. The day before the killings, he had simply gone to see his uncle in the village of Bulpen, also close to Rettendon, to pick up Steele's boat trailer. "I banged on the door. I remember the letterbox in the middle of the door. I held it open with my fingers and shouted through it, but there was no one about. Finally, I left a note. Dennis Womes, Jack's uncle, was brought in to corroborate the story. He agreed with Jack's version of events completely. He remembered that his nephew had indeed left a note to say that he'd called, but, not surprisingly, he had long since thrown it away." Ian Bristow, of the Forensic Engineers Association, seemed to confirm this version of events when he told the court that Womes could have not have made the call logged in his mobile at 6:59 when Womes was alleged to have told Nichols to come and get us, because his mobile signal would not work on either of the two aerials covering the crime scene. However, if he'd been on the nearby A130, he could have. Other witnesses, some of them former friends of Nichols, testified to the poor state of the Passat. It had no heater, a noisy exhaust, and to all intents a clutch that was unstable. The idea that anybody would use it as a getaway car for a triple murder was laughable. Finally, there was only a single footprint found on the ground by the offside back door of the Range Rover where the killer would have stood. It was identified as coming from a size 10 high-tech training shoe. Letterman pointed out that Jack Womes wore a size 11 and, according to Nichols, was wearing Wellington boots at the time of the murder. In a nutshell, there was nothing, absolutely nothing, to suggest that Jack Womes had ever been down the lane itself. If the jury looked at the facts, said Letterman, he could not possibly be responsible for the murders. Graham Parkins and David Letterman had more convincing cases for the innocence of their clients. If Steele and Womes were truly the victims of a cruel fantasy created by Darren Nichols, if the evidence against them had been concocted, dreamed up and falsified with the help of the Essex police, if the lack of forensic and other evidence of their guilt was purely down to the fact that they had no guilt, it left only one question. If Steele and Wholmes had not murdered Tate, Tucker and Rolfe, then who did? As the weeks had passed, the defence had offered up some tantalising possibilities without ever spilling out the allegations fully. It had emerged, for example, that the shotgun cartridges used in the murder were a type popular with clay pigeon shooters. DC Jim, who had been heard on tape discussing with Nichols ways of ripping Steele off by stealing his Jaguar while it was carrying £150,000, was a regular clay pigeon shooter. Jim was now under arrest. The implication was obvious. The mysterious Joneses brothers, from whom Tate had supposedly borrowed £40,000, were vaguely touted as another possibility, as were literally dozens of other members of the Essex and London underworld. But it wasn't until December, when the trial was in its 4th month, that a full, practical and detailed alternative explanation for the deaths came to court. And when it did, it was absolute dynamite.
He says categorically, I drove the man who did kill Tucker, Tate and Rolfe to Rettendam, and that man is the man who was responsible for murdering them.